There are some big misconceptions around patellofemoral pain or pain on the front side of your knee that need to be cleared up. If you're someone who's dealt with this anterior pain, you know how frustrating it can be to deal with this sensation. And in order to fully address it, you'll need to do more than just stretch this and strengthen that. The dynamics behind what creates this pain all comes down to what's happening in behind this little bone at your kneecap, where the patella and femur intersect to create your patellofemoral joint. In an ideal world, the tractioning of this joint moves more or less vertical. When it doesn't, and the kneecap begins to shift side to side, we can start to experience shearing at the kneecap, and as a result, you get a sensation of pain. A lot of traditional approaches will walk you down the path of stretching out the muscles on the lateral side of your leg, while simultaneously strengthening your quadriceps. Although this is well intended, there's a lot more that influences the dynamics of the knee than purely the musculature around it. Now, the tissues around the knee are certainly part of the puzzle, but there's a lot more to you than simply a lever at the knee that is going to impact your patellofemoral pain. Throughout this video, you will not only learn how to strengthen the tissues around the knee that help to provide stability, but also understand and experience firsthand how to integrate your movement around the knee to allow for a smooth glide to happen at this important juncture. Let's get into it. So how we're gonna work through this is in two different parts. There's gonna be a strength portion and a movement portion. The strength portion is going to be more oriented towards strengthening the musculature around the quads, the hamstrings, integrating the musculature between the knee and the pelvis. And then when we get into the movement side, it's going to be focused on kind of taking these sensations that we were creating around here, but adding more of a dynamic nature to them. So for our first strength exercise, we're going to focus on strengthening these guys right here, our quads, especially the part of the quads that are most proximal to the knee. So what you're gonna wanna grab is a small stool, or a box would work here as well. That's roughly about 6-7 inches off the ground. And you can grab a dowel here for some assistance if you find that you struggle with single leg work. This will just help to keep things a little bit more stable for you. So what we're gonna do is come into a split stance position, and we're gonna start to drop ourselves down into a lunge, just to the point where the knee gets more or less on top of the big toe. We don't have to go crazy with it, but just so the knee is on top of the big toe, and then we're kind of dropping the hips down. Now from this position, what we're gonna draw some awareness to is gonna be our right heel. And we're gonna do something I call a heel scoop. So we're gonna apply pressure down through the heel, and we're gonna begin to scoop that forward. So I'm gonna start to drive that away, using the lead leg as my primary driver to take me through that. So I'm not just falling back onto this back leg, that would be cheating, so let's not do that. You're gonna just maintain weight through that lead leg, and then we're just gonna drop down back into it. Again, hips are dropping down, knee is gently tracking forward. I'm light on the dowel here, I'm not applying a lot of pressure through that. And then we're just gonna work that scooping motion through the heel as we come back to an upright position. As you are working through this, you'll probably start to feel a lot of feedback come into the lead leg quads, especially if you are using this as the primary driver to do so. You should definitely feel the musculature around the quads that are more proximal to the knee being worked here. And I would work through this for about anywhere between 10 to 12 reps at about this tempo. So we're doing about a 3 to 5 second count down. I'm going for control here, making sure that my knee isn't tracking in or out. I'm just trying to keep that more or less on top of the ankle. And whew, you'll definitely start to get some feedback into the quads. So for the next piece to our strength work, we're gonna start to get into these guys, our hamstrings. So we can use the same box that we're using for our first exercise, but instead of it being in front of us, we're gonna take it slightly behind. So the intention here is having the box behind us is gonna allow us to get more lead leg pressure, but a lot of the same principles from the first exercise are gonna apply here, especially in terms of keeping the kneecap itself tracking on top of the ankle. You're gonna really wanna be mindful that you're not getting any type of lateral or medial shifting of the knee. For the most part, we're gonna wanna try to keep this in alignment. So how we're gonna set this one up is we're gonna come into our split stance position. It's not gonna be a very long stance, because we're gonna try to get more into a hinge position to try to capture the hamstrings here. So we're gonna start by keeping the toes more or less relaxed, having kind of midfoot pressure to start with. And then we're gonna do a slight hip rotation into this lead leg. So in this case, I'm rotating into my right hip. We can also take the palm of our hand here for some feedback to kind of push that hip back against. And what I'll challenge you to do is, if you're finding that you have good alignment between the knee and the ankle, is just to take your center of mass a little bit forward here. So I'm kind of just drifting forward, and that's really gonna challenge the tissues of the hamstring and kind of that posterior side, but only go as far as you can keep the toes themselves somewhat relaxed and heel pressure intact. So I got the heel pressure, my leg's starting to shake here, so we know that it's working. And I'm gonna apply pressure down through the heel, keeping the knee more or less where it is. And then my hips are gonna come up to extension from there. When I get to the top, I can do a little bit of a reset. And then again, my hand will be here for feedback so that I can rotate that right hip back again into it, capture the slight stretch through that hamstring. I'm sensing feedback there. And then I'm gonna stand up over about a 3 to 4 second period here. I would suggest working through this anywhere between about 8 to 10 reps. Tempo will be about the same, 3 to 5 seconds down, brief pause at the bottom, then 3 to 5 seconds back up. All right, let's get moving. Let's see if we can take some of that strength work where we're focusing on the dynamics of the quad and the hamstring, keeping the kneecap and everything more or less neutral, making sure that glide is staying more or less vertical. Let's start to apply that to a more dynamic motion. So we're gonna do so through something called a decel lunge. This is gonna be us more or less absorbing our body weight coming forward. So to start with this one, we're gonna come into a single leg position with our knee up like so. And we're gonna start rotated away from this lead leg. Now I'm just gonna fall forward. And as I fall forward, I'm gonna capture momentum into this lead leg. You may want to pause here on the first one just to make sure that you have good alignment between the knee and the ankle. And then it's going to be a push away and I'm back to stability. Ideally, as we're going through this, it's a pretty elastic and reflexive motion off the bottom there. So I'm just kind of sensing my foot catching in the floor, kind of going heel to toe. And you can even think about that heel scoop motion that we're working on in our first strength exercise with the quads. And I'm just kind of doing almost like a teeter-totter motion here. You can even add a little bit of upper body rotation into this and just see if you can come back to a brief period of stability at this top position. So I'm just pausing here briefly. I come back, catch, and then I'm up. If you are experiencing any type of pain on that landing, then I'd just be mindful that your knee isn't going too much into a flexion, as this is gonna stress the tissues around the kneecap itself. So just be mindful that you are landing more or less with a vertical shin angle for now. If you are experiencing pain, if you're not, then you can start to push that range of motion and land more in a shin angle to push that range of motion of the tendons and the muscles and just start to work through that in a more dynamic fashion. You can work through this one anywhere between 12 to about 14 repetitions. And just again, being mindful that it is reflexive and relatively rhythmic as you're going through it. All right, so for the last one to bulletproof your knees, if you're dealing with anterior knee pain or patellofemoral pain, this last one is gonna be really great because it creates a sense of impact through your feet and kind of teaches your feet how to interact and react off the ground. So we're gonna do so through some jumping. We're gonna start with both feet, and what I would suggest you do is just start with kind of a gentle rhythm here, and then you're gonna land. We're just gonna pause at this bottom position and just look down, see where your knees are at relative to your ankles and your feet. If everything's all good, you can just go through that again. So doing a jump, and then a pause. What you'll want to be mindful of here is that kneecap positioning, being mindful that we're not landing in an excess of valgus or even a varus of the knees, which is just your knees excessively turned out. We're just going to be looking for things to be more or less square at that bottom position. And as we start to get the feel for this, we can start to increase the height of the jump as we come down into it, and then we can pop back out of that. We're just kind of getting used to starting in a rhythm, kind of bouncing, being soft through the feet, taking a good jump, and then landing at that bottom phase. If you wanted to build on this, you certainly can, and we can start to do a single leg version. Now this isn't gonna be for the faint-hearted. This is probably gonna challenge me quite a bit as well. So if you struggle to have good stability here with 2 feet, just stick with this for now, but then you can progress to the single leg version where now we're hopping on 1 foot, keeping that same sort of dynamic. I'm kind of just hopping around for this video's sake, but ideally you're just doing it on the spot. And then I'm gonna hop, land down, and we can see my body is trying to calibrate that bottom position to try to find stability for me at the bottom there. And I can feel this whole line around my quads, my hamstrings, and my glutes really having to fire to stabilize me in this position. I'll stick on this side. I'm gonna go back to my hop. This leg is certainly feeling it. And then I land back at that bottom position. And we can see I even got some work to do here through this single leg version of it. But the more that I can get used to doing this and kind of capturing momentum into that hip and around the stabilizers of the knee, over time, it's gonna start to teach this musculature how to receive impact, which is gonna be a huge part if you deal with any type of knee pain, especially anterior knee pain. You wanna start to get used to receiving momentum and load in this fashion. This one will definitely start to get your heart rate up as well. Both the single and double leg versions will, but I would suggest working through anywhere between about 8 to 10 reps on each side. Go through about maybe 5 to 6 bounces in between, and that'll definitely get the legs and the musculature around the knees working for you. So as you have come to learn throughout the course of this video, there is a lot more to addressing anterior knee pain or just knee pain in general than just strengthening the muscles around the knees, around the hamstrings. We want to start to look at things like weight distribution, momentum, how to receive and kind of absorb things like load from one side to the other, and overall how to take these tensions and start to apply them in a more dynamic way, as that's going to get us a little bit closer to the stimulus that we face on a day-to-day basis, and overall just protect our knees and our body for the long term. So if you're into this integrative or more holistic approach to looking at the body and movement and strength, then you can go watch another video I did on the body in some capacity right here.